Hello again, this is Dr. Jonathan Bentovish. These series of lectures comes after the publication of the God's Physics book, A New Scientific Paradigm for the 21st Century. This was published just recently by iUniverse.com, and it's written for the general public, describing the revolution that's taking place in 21st century theoretical physics. This theory I've been working on and publishing over 50 peer-reviewed scientific articles, one by this, including a special issue by global journals, and this book coming out for the general layman readership, because I believe, as I said previously, I believe that this revolution, this new paradigm for 21st century is not just for scientists. It brings a tremendous message and change for the general public and for humanity at large. Today I want to speak about a topic that does appear in the book, in God's Physics book, and that is the fact that this theory negates and challenges the Big Bang model, Einstein's and general relativity theory's Big Bang model. Let's explain that just in general terms and explain why this theory negates this Big Bang model. According to Einstein's general relativity theory, the world and the universe operates merely as directed or caused by the direct physical interactions between massive objects and space-time. Massive object curves space-time, and curved space-time determines how these massive and less massive objects will travel through space and time. And we gave the metaphor of the trampoline, which is often used to explain how a mercury ball placed at the center of this curved membrane of the trampoline, it would cause other marbles that we would throw into this trampoline to curve around and gravitate towards that sunken middle part of the trampoline. And in the same manner, relativity theory advocates all of space-time, all of the fabric of space is curved around these massive objects. And more than that, the relativity theory assumes that the whole universe begun by a Big Bang nuclear event. The whole mass of the universe was condensed in a tennis ball or in a very small object, and eventually that led to an explosion, to a nuclear event that dispersed all of the matter, energy, suns, galaxies, planets, including our own Earth planet. And the universe is being accelerated increasingly at a higher and higher rate. Imagine a person inflating a balloon, and the inflation of the balloon is becoming quicker and quicker and quicker. That actually is, I mentioned that earlier, but it's important to mention that again, that actually this accelerated expansion of the universe is today one of the major problems that 20th century physics, relativity theory and quantum mechanics are facing, because the old model, the Material-Causal model of relativity theory and quantum mechanics, cannot explain that accelerated expansion. It has to assume that there exists dark matter and dark energy, and lo and behold, according to that assumption, that's up to 95% of all the mass and energy in the universe, which essentially cannot be observed experimentally, cannot be accounted for. So that means that the old model of relativity theory and quantum mechanics simply fails right now, and it has to be replaced and expanded into this new God's physics paradigm. Again, I wrote this for the general public, and these lectures that I'm delivering is for the general public, because I believe it's very important. The change that's taking place in science, the whole world needs to know about that. The whole of humanity needs to be educated about that, because it changes completely our perception and our life accordingly. And so that assumption that the Big Bang has then caused an expansion of the universe and the universe supposedly is expanding quicker and quicker due to dark matter, dark energy, which cannot be observed. And I mentioned earlier in one of the previous lectures and in the book that the state of theoretical physics, of physics now at this point in time, is similar to what happened before Einstein made his breakthrough with relativity theory, because back then also science has come to a dead end, so to speak, in which the old model, Newtonian mechanics and Maxwellian electromagnetic theory, could not account for major phenomena. And back then also science had to assume that there is a very fine ether element that perfuses the universe, and with that ether concept the old model could hold. But the problem was that Michelson, Morley and other experimental physicists tried to verify and validate and detect this ether concept, which was so critical to sustain the old model, but they just couldn't find it. And then Einstein came along with his genius and open-mindedness and boldness, and he said, okay, if we cannot observe the ether, then let's discard of it and let's build a new model with some of these postulates for relativity theory that can account for the various phenomena. And therefore he built the relativity theory. He had a critical prediction about Mercury's perihelion around the sun, that the curved pathway, which was double the value that Newton predicted, when that was verified in 1919 solar eclipse, Einstein's general relativity prevailed. And we stand at a very, very similar situation, because right now quantum mechanics, relativity theory contradict each other, and also they cannot account for this 95% of all mass and matter and energy in the universe, and that has to lead to the discarding of dark matter, dark energy, like Einstein did with the ether. And I wrote one of those 50 plus articles about discarding dark matter and dark energy as superfluous, and that leads to this new model. But our focus right now is about the Big Bang model, and essentially I want to explain again what the major difference between this new model and the old model, the old material model of relativity theory and quantum mechanics, and the new paradigm of God's physics, or the computational field theory. What is the difference, and why and how does this new paradigm of God's physics paradigm, how does that discard and negate the Big Bang model, and what exciting alternative it offers, and some of the critical predictions alike or similar to what Einstein asked astronomers back then to verify his theory. What are the critical predictions that I'm calling continuously and repeatedly for experimental physicists to carry out one of these predictions and validate this new God's physics paradigm, which has already received initial empirical validation through the proton radius puzzle, as I've written in articles and in this book. But still, I am asking for experimental physicists and cosmologists and astronomers to validate one of a few critical predictions that would validate this new model. So what's the difference between this new God's physics and the old material-causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics? I've elaborated on this in one of the previous presentations, but I just want to highlight. The old material-causal paradigm of relativity theory and quantum mechanics essentially assume that anything in the universe, whether it's the macroscopic universe as explained by relativity theory, or the microscopic realm of subatomic particles described by quantum mechanics, in both cases, both of these models, they assume that any phenomena, anything in the universe, can be explained just by interactions, direct interactions between material entities. Okay, so in the case of general relativity, it's the interaction between massive objects such as the sun and stars and space-time. So massive objects curve space-time. Space-time determines how these massive and less massive objects will be traveling through space-time. So it's an interaction, direct interaction, and supposedly that old model says we can explain anything in the universe just based on this direct material interaction. Then quantum mechanics on the subatomic realm assumes that if you want to measure any behavior of subatomic particles, you just create a situation of a direct interaction between a probe and a target. The target is assumed to possess a probability wave function where it's dispersed statistically over space and time in a certain manner, and through their interaction you can then determine what the values of the target element are, except that by the interaction, that target element which was dispersed across the probability wave function collapses into a singular complementary value. But again, the assumption is that you can explain anything in the subatomic realm or the relativistic large universe scale just by direct interactions of either massive objects and space-time, or the probe, subatomic probe, and target element, which collapses the target probability wave function. So the assumption is material-causal. You have direct interaction between two elements, and that this interaction determines the behavior. Obviously, as we said, as I wrote in the book and I explained in some previous presentations, since this old model is not working any longer because of the contradiction between relativity theory and quantum mechanics, because of the fact that this old model cannot explain where 95% of all the mass and energy in the universe exist, assuming dark matter, dark energy, which cannot be detected. So because of this paradigmatic crisis, or the need to change and expand the old model of material-causal paradigm into a new, broader paradigm, such as the God's physics paradigm, because of that, the new model, the God's physics paradigm, has made a major leap, a major advancement in science. And what it assumes, I'm explaining now how this new paradigm is different, the new God's physics paradigm, computational unified field theory paradigm, how is it different from the old material-causal paradigm? And one of the differences is that the new God's physics paradigm discovered the existence of a singular, higher-ordered, what I call universal computational / consciousness principle. And I represented that by the Hebrew letter Yud. You can see that white dot. It's not a dot, but it's similar to a dot. That's the Yud letter. And that Yud letter represents this universal computational or consciousness principle. In acronym, it's UCP. So that UCP, that universal computational consciousness principle, is assumed now to compute the whole universe as a series of very, very rapid frames, universal frames. So many billions and billions and billions of times per second. It's given by c squared divided by Planck's constant, which gives us 1.36 in the power of minus 50 zeros. It's many, many billions of times per second that this UCP computes every pixel, every point in the universe simultaneously. So at every billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second, etc., this UCP computes the whole universe as one frame, as one picture, three-dimensional of course, but one frame. And all the points in that frame are computed and presented simultaneously. Between one frame and another, the whole universe dissolves back into this UCP. So the universe doesn't exist as a universe, it dissolved back to the UCP. And what that means, by the way, is that the only thing that is constant and continuous in the universe is the UCP, is this universal consciousness principle, reality. And it manifests, it creates continuously the universe, creates and dissolves, and then recreates and evolves the universe. It's a continuous process. And the universe does not exist as a material entity, it exists as a manifestation of this universal consciousness reality, which is quite amazing and is very important for us as human beings to understand this new perspective of science. So essentially, this new God's physics paradigm is called also an acausal computation paradigm. And essentially saying, actually, there is no cause and effect, that old assumption of material causality, massive objects curving space-time, etc., or subatomic probe element hitting and interacting with the target subatomic wave probability function, causing its collapse. These interactions do not exist any longer. They cannot exist. Why? Simply because we said the UCP, the Universal Computational / Consciousness Principle, it computes simultaneously all the points in one frame. So obviously there cannot be any interaction because they're all presented simultaneously. And between one frame and another, the universe dissolves back into the UCP. So that means that you cannot have any effect or interaction either within a given frame, single or multiple frames, nor can you have any interaction between, let's say, the first frame and a second frame or the third frame, because the whole universe dissolves back into the UCP. There's no effect or material entity that can pass between frames. So that leads us to an amazing new realization that of God's physics, that there cannot exist any material causal interaction, and therefore the only thing that really happens in the universe is the continuous production, computation, dissolution, reproduction, and evolution of the frames just by this UCP. And so now let's tie this with the Big Bang model. The new model, by the way, incorporates, as did relativity theory, it incorporates key elements of relativity theory and quantum mechanics within the new model. And for example, there is a universal computational formula, which, by the way, is imprinted at the bottom of this God's Physics book, and throughout the book it's explained. This universal computational formula explains how this UCP compute simultaneously every pixel in the universe, and interestingly, this universal computational formula embeds within it relativity theory and quantum mechanics as special cases, just as relativity theory incorporated Newtonian mechanics as a special case. But the point is, according to this new God's physics computational paradigm, that there's no cause and effect between material entities, there cannot be the Big Bang model, which assumes that we had an initial frame in which there was an explosion or a nuclear event. That nuclear event led to the creation in the second, third, fourth, nth or billion and so on and so forth frame. Essentially, it explained that. So the old Big Bang model assumes